Alrighty, I'm going to be starting a little bit early today, but we are going to be discussing why is getting remote access from IT so hard. So, my name is Phil Zito. Welcome to this episode of BAM TV, episode 5. So, like I said, my name is Phil Zito. I am the owner of Building Automation Monthly, the premier online training site for building automation professionals who want to learn building automation. All right, so what are we going to be covering in this episode? One of the most difficult topics, which is remote access. You see, remote access is quite simply how you can access your building automation system without being at a site. So, like I said, this is episode number 5, and this is remote access. All right, in this episode, we are going to be discussing what remote access is, why it is so difficult to get remote access, and kind of what IT is thinking when you're asking for remote access, and then a couple different methods of going and achieving remote access. Now, since I am live streaming this episode, it probably wouldn't do very well for me to start doing remote access. That would mess with the stream. But what we can do is we can talk through what IT is thinking. So when you are asking for remote access, essentially what you're asking for is, let's say that you have a building here, okay? And you, inside this building, you have a BAS system, okay? And this BAS system goes to this kind of internal cloud, which we'll call the IT network. This is kind of traditionally how things are set up. And then this goes to the greater internet, INT, which then you can access via your laptop or you can access via your office. But essentially what you are trying to do is you are trying to go and access a building automation system remotely. Now, why would you want to access a building automation system remotely? Well, there's 3 main reasons. So you don't have to do what are called truck rolls. You don't have to send people to troubleshoot things. 2 is so that you can manage. And when I say manage, I mean you can manage multiple facilities no matter where you're at. And the third reason is to support install. One of my favorite things to do was to set up a wireless router and go and sit in my truck when it was really hot in a mechanical room and program the central plant or program an air handler sitting in my air-conditioned truck. That was a very small-scale version of remote access, but it was remote access nonetheless. So these are the 3 reasons a BAS professional, a facility operator, a owner, a technician would want to go and have remote access. Now, you may be saying to yourself, okay, well, what are the reasons IT would not want to provide you remote access? Well, those would be, 1, they don't understand BAS. Okay? 2 would be kind of don't have, and this is a subset of number 1, an architecture plan. And I'll explain what that means in a second. And 3 would be cybersecurity fears, which ultimately, once again, ties back to number 1. You'll see that all of these, not understanding BAS, not having an architecture plan, not having cybersecurity, these all tie back to reason number 1 of why an IT group would not want to provide you remote access. So the question then becomes, naturally, what can we do about that? Well, what is our strategy when dealing with IT? So the first thing is to understand, and right now I'm giving a kind of brief overview, but I'll be diving deeper in just a second. Understand the IT layout. And this is both organizationally as well as technically. Now, I'm not saying that you need to be an architecture expert. That's not at all what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that you do need to understand how an IT group is organized and how IT groups are technically laid out. How is their network laid out? How do they access the external network? How do they manage their internal network? The second thing is to educate. You have to educate an IT group, and this is where a lot of BAS folks get uncomfortable, is they feel that they don't have the expertise, they don't have the qualifications to educate an IT group. But when you really think about it, the IT group doesn't understand BAS, so they don't have the qualifications or expertise to be making decisions that a BAS system is or isn't secure, or is or can or cannot be connected to their network. So you can start to see why you want to go and actually make sure that you are educating IT. So this is a two-way street. And 3, you want to pick the right remote access architecture. So we're going to dive into each one of these, okay? The first thing we're going to do is understanding an IT layout in organization and technical, and then we're going to talk about educating IT, and then we're going to talk about picking the right remote access. So IT number 1, understanding the organization. So I talk a lot more about this in my Information Technologies Fundamentals course, but I'm going to give you kind of the flyby here. Essentially, you want to understand how a group is organized, and you want to understand how their systems are laid out. So 2 kind of buckets. Now, for a lot of you, you understand what IP addresses are because you've had to add them to supervisory devices. You understand what basic subnets are, basic networks. But what you don't maybe feel comfortable with is taking that technical knowledge and putting it into an architecture. And that's okay. I'm going to teach you a real simple trick to do that in just a second. But organizationally, you need to know who you're talking to. So who are you talking to? And this is something I preach heavily in my course, is that you want to make sure you're talking to the right person. So, for example, when you are trying to do remote access, there's really only 2 people you should be talking to, and that's the network people and the cybersecurity people. And even then, sometimes you don't even need to talk to the cybersecurity people. But if you're talking to the database administrator, or you're talking to the server person and trying to get remote access to your BAS, then you're not going to be successful. That's where a lot of you get hung up. You're connected to a general IT manager, or maybe you had some guy in IT set up a server for you, and you're sitting there and you're working with this server guy trying to get remote access, and he has no credentials to the network. Think about it this way, right? You are sitting as a facility operator, or you're a technician, and your specialty is maybe going and just doing point configuration and calibration. You have no clue about sensor or programming. You have no programming tools. If I asked you to set up a program for me or change a program, even if you wanted to, you couldn't do that. And it's very much the same with IT, although I would argue that IT actually takes this to a whole nother level, because they are very siloed and segmented, whereas BAS tends to overlap. But IT is very segmented. So who are you talking to is extremely important to understand. Now, I said I would tell you a very simple way to understand the technical things. So really, when it comes to getting remote access, there's only really one thing that matters. And that is not W. I was about to write how, and I wrote a W. How do you get out of the network? Nothing else matters if you can't get out of the network. And here's what I mean by this. You can use VPNs, which we'll talk about. You can use VNC. You can use dedicated DSL lines. You can use modems. You can use Wi-Fi. You can use cellular. None of that matters if you don't know how you get out of the network. So the most important thing you need to understand is how you get out. So what you need to focus on when you are working with these network and cybersecurity folks is how do you allow folks to remotely access your network? That's the main question. How do you allow them to remotely access your network, and what requirements do they need to meet? And usually they will respond with something like, well, we provide a VPN access for them. They need to have a dedicated client. They need to have a credential for each person. That's on kind of more medium security sites. On high security sites, and I'll be honest with you, there are some sites like government, DoD, that you're probably just not going to get remote access to. But on medium security sites, that's kind of the answer you're going to get. That's a pretty easy answer to deal with, right? That's just you doing the paperwork, you managing the logins, et cetera, et cetera. The harder one are kind of the low security, no IT groups. Low security or no IT. And the reason that those are harder are because either their IT group is some outsourced IT provider, or they're just some guy who just happens to be related to someone and he manages a Linksys combo router switch. And I'm assuming you understand IT terminology. If not, I'll put in the comments a link to an article I wrote around IT terminology, and that'll help a lot. But that low security or no IT staff, that is the most difficult, because here's the thing. You don't want to be responsible for managing the remote connection, but there's no one there who understands how to set this up. And so you're kind of in a quandary. Now, I'm going to answer how we do this, how we go and deal with low security and no IT, after I real quickly go through the 4 types of remote connections. Because if I don't go through those, then my answer to low security or no IT is not going to make sense. And also, while we're going through these 4 architecture types, we'll be answering those questions around what is a BAS and how is it secure, et cetera, et cetera. So when you're dealing with remote connections, there's really 3 things you need to have. One is you need to have an IP address that is routable, meaning a non-private IP address. And once again, if you don't know what these things mean, either go and purchase my IT program or just go and do some Googling around private versus public IP addresses, routing, etc. So you need to have an IP address that's routable, meaning that it can get out of the network. You need to have the right ports open, and you need to go and have a way to connect. So I'm going to put a way to connect. And this way to connect is going to use ports and IP addresses. And I realize if this is new to you, some of these things may not make sense. Once again, this is where you're going to want to go do some research. I'm going to give you a lot of the fundamentals in these live TV streams. I'm going to guide you down the path, but it's up to you to make the decision to embrace your career, to take this stuff, trying not to curse, take this stuff seriously, and really go and learn it, okay? So you need a routable IP address, a port, and a connection. Why do you need that? Well, let's look at the first connection type, which is a VPN. So over here you have, we're just going to call it Company A Network. Okay, and then what happens with a VPN, which stands for a virtual private network? Focusing on those words I just said. Virtual, meaning it's not a real network, it's an extension of a network. Private, meaning it's not open to the public, and it's a network. So essentially what happens is, let's say you've got your office building right here. Well, what happens is they give you a VPN application that is on your computer, and that creates essentially a tunnel, but that is encrypted, that travels over the internet and extends this Company A network to your machine. That's a virtual private network. So you would run a client, and a client's a piece of software that would connect back to the VPN server. And let's say that the address range for this VPN is 168.1.x/24, which I discussed IP addresses, at least I think I discussed them in a previous episode. If not, I've definitely talked about them on the podcast, on the blog as well. But what would happen is this network, this private subnet, would get extended to your machine. So that's method one. What are the pros of a VPN? Well, the pros of a VPN are that it goes and extends the network. So the traffic from end to end is encrypted, it's secure, and most importantly, they can monitor what's going on because it's their network that's being extended, meaning the IT group. This is most common in medium to large organizations. And it's as simple as going and installing a client, managing some login credentials, which is a username and password, logging onto the VPN. And then when you're on the VPN, you can then use the BAS software that's on your client, on your laptop here, to connect to a BAS server. That's the most common one. Now, naturally, this would not be something you would want to do in a low security to no, or low IT to no IT environment because it's very difficult to maintain. You would have to go and maintain credentials. You'd have to maintain a VPN server. You'd have to, it's just trust me. You don't want to do it in those environments. Now, I'll tell you though, there is some really cool stuff coming out, like EasyIO. I know their FS controller, and this is one of the controllers that I am going to be using to teach some things in my BAM Premium program, which is closed right now, but I'm going to be teaching some stuff around controls using this controller. And it's got a built-in VPN server that you can then use. It's really cool. It's I think besides for LinkSpring, it's the second company I've seen do some sort of VPN appliance. So you can see that that's something, if you want to mess around with VPNs, I encourage you to check that out. Now, the second method is a VNC, which is a virtual network connection. If you've been in the BAS world for any amount of time, you've probably heard of things like Go to My PC, or the one I use the most, which is slipping my mind right now, is TeamViewer. I like using TeamViewer. It has a free license. That way you can teach yourself how VNCs work, and then if you want to use it in a commercial setting, you just upgrade it to the paid version. But essentially, it's the same thing, right? So you've got company A right here, and then you've got the internet, and then you've got your PC over here. And what happens is this TeamViewer software essentially creates what is called a virtual network connection. Now, I want you to notice the changes in what was said there. Virtual private network versus virtual network connection. Now, a virtual private network is a one-to-many. What I mean by that is you connect to a network and you can access any machines on that private network that you have access to. So if you wanted to access supervisory devices, if you wanted to access servers, that is where a VPN is really nice. Now, a VNC is a one-to-one typically, meaning your BAS server sitting here is connected one-to-one via this virtual network connection. Now, this is a very easy setup to do. It's really easy to do. It's moderately to high security. I know a lot of folks don't like VNCs, but for what we're doing here, it's moderately secure. It's not the most secure like a VPN, but it is much more secure than the other options we're going to discuss in just a second. So you would go and download the software, you log in, and it allows you to directly connect to the BAS server. All right, so that's VNC. That is method number 2. Now, what are the pros and cons here? Well, the pros are it's very simple, very lightweight, it's very easy to set up, and it's something that you yourself can do, and there's almost no maintenance involved. The cons here are that a lot of IT groups frown upon these because essentially you're punching a hole in their network, and you also are introducing some software that they have no management over. So you tend to not see these in medium to large installations, but in low to no IT groups, these work quite well. Now, the third that we're going to talk is called public IP. And this is something that confuses a lot of folks because what they think, and I've seen this from time to time, and there's two ways you can do public IP, and I'm going to show you. Number one is what you can do is you've got a BAS server, and that BAS server goes to a router, and that router uses a concept called PAT or NAT, which is protocol address translation or network address translation, to allow you to connect to the server. Now, that is more secure than the second option of public IP, but it's less secure than VNC, and it's less secure than VPN because, quite simply, someone just needs to discover that kind of natted IP address, and then they can figure out how to connect to the server. The second option of public IP, and this is the one you see quite often, and it's where folks are like, never do this. And I'm 80% in that never do this camp. I'm not 100% in that never do this camp, but I'm 80% there. And I'll tell you why. But basically what happens is you have a BAS server, and you may have heard this term before called NIC, Network Interface Card. I covered it in Local Area Networks. I think that was episode 2 or 3, I believe. And what you have is you have what is this concept called dual NICs. I'm going to write that down here. Dual NICs. And no, those are not Niagara Information Conformance Statements. Those are network interface communications cards, basically, or network interface cards, depending on how you want to define the acronym. And on one side, you have the private BAS network, and on the other side, you have the public network. And what you would do is you would give a public IP to this NIC, and you would have the private network and a private IP on this NIC. So all of your supervisory devices and any IP field controllers, those would connect on the private side. And on the public side, you would use the internet once again, and you would have your client right here, and you would just enter the IP address of the server, and you would open up the user interface. So that is public IP. Now, obviously, that's even more potentially dangerous because what is going on with that is now you are able to specifically access this machine, and you're able to go and access it with no form of device between you. You're going straight to the machine. So that's where you could potentially have firewall issues. You have no access control list. I know these are concepts that you may not know yet. Once again, go Google these concepts or purchase my IT training program. That way you don't have to waste time on Google and you can learn it all. It's all right there for you. But like I said, public IP, very much frowned upon, is something you can do. I often see this on new construction while the building's being built, and it's semi-acceptable then. You'll have someone who maybe puts in a 4G cellular device and connects the BAS to the cellular device so that you can go and have remote connectivity to the BAS server, do that remote commissioning, and then you disable that device after the project's complete. But this is frowned upon. And then there is the fourth option, which, yes, folks still use this option, albeit not near as much and very rarely, and it's the modem option. And essentially, you would use a modem to connect through the internet to the BAS server. You would basically call the server, create that modem connection, and then you would interface with the server via the modem. Now, the downsides of this are it's slow. It surprisingly is actually a little more secure than an IP address, but yet not more secure. So if that weird statement makes no sense to you, the reason why it's more secure is it's really hard to find the phone number that you need to call to connect to the BS. It's kind of antiquated technology. But at the same time, it's less secure because there's less kind of controls, which are security mechanisms that you can put in place. So those are the 4 mechanisms for remote connection. Now, we talked about that an IT group, you need to understand the architecture. So you're going to work with the IT group to understand their architecture, understand their methods, to then be able to go and understand which of those kind of approaches works best. And usually at a more advanced IT group, they're going to tell you which approach you need to use. But I laid out that there were 3 challenges, and I'm trying to remember what order I put these in. But it's basically, what is a BAS? What do I need to do? And then the third one is security. So what we addressed here is now you understand the 4 methods for going and interfacing with a BAS via remote connection. You understand the 4 methods. Now it's up to you to be able to take and teach IT what a BAS is. And I've covered this in the previous episodes where I talked about what a BAS architecture is. And you need to explain to them several different things. So what they want to know specifically is what ports typically, what software, and these are going to go in increasing level of security. So what ports, what software, then what is your patching process? So these 2 things, the general IT group are going to ask what ports and what software. What ports do you need open? What software are you going to be running? Then as you move into more advanced IT groups, you're going to get what is your patching process? So how do we make sure that this is secure? What is your testing process? Meaning, how do you test cybersecurity? And then you're going to move into this kind of land, which is where you really, if you're the manufacturer, you need to engage your engineering group. If you're reselling a manufactured device, maybe you're a distributor of Tritium, Distech, etc., you need to go and contact that manufacturer's engineering group to answer this last question, which is essentially test. They want to go and test the security of your system prior to putting it on their network. So that is the big kind of, these are the questions that you're going to have to answer. And I don't have time to go through each one of these, but suffice to say, if you're able to answer these right, the IT process can be very smooth. If you can't answer these, then the IT process can be very painful. And usually it's the BAS folks getting hung up on these questions that causes folks to not succeed with IT. It's not that IT doesn't want to work with them. It's either that they're not working with the right IT person, or they do not understand the questions IT is asking, or they don't seem confident in the answer. And because of that, IT folks are like, okay, you don't even know what a port is. I'm not letting you touch my network because I got a wife and kids, and I don't want to get fired because your BAS causes a breach, and so on and so forth. All right, so that takes us through the session today. And now we're going to move into the question and answer session. So you just go into the comments. This is a very requested episode. A lot of folks have requested this episode. And so I would imagine that I'll have a fair amount of comments. If I don't have comments in the live, just leave them on the recording and I will answer those. Obviously, I can't answer those like I can on a live call where I can actually whiteboard out the answer, but I'll do my best to type an answer. And like I said, IT is the future of BAS. There's no way around it. Cloud hosting, Tritium's doing database as a server. You've got all the major manufacturers doing IP controls. You've got analytics, etc., etc. And if you really want to take your career to the next level, you've got to learn IT. I've created an IT training program that you can find at buildingautomationmonthly.com/store called Information Technology for BAS Professionals. I really encourage you to pick up that program. It has had tremendous results in the folks who have went through that program. So with that being said, I will wait a couple minutes for you to ask whatever questions you have around information technology. And if you don't have any questions, then I will get back to my regular day and I will see your questions after the fact. So feel free to ask whatever you want. Don't be shy. There are no stupid questions, just people who are pretending to know what they're talking about and making stupid statements. So go ahead, ask your questions. Let me know. I'd love to answer them for you. Otherwise, I will go and get everything set up for the next week's call. Oh, by the way, in February, I'm not sure if I'm going to be recording for the first 2 weeks of February. I'm taking a 2 week trip to Europe with my wife, and she has made me promise that I will try to avoid my computer while we're in Europe. I'm actually speaking on IT. I'm doing a keynote at the Smart Buildings Conference in Amsterdam. I've been invited to go over there and do a keynote speech, and I am very excited about that. I'm going to be talking about IT in Amsterdam. So, with that being said, I don't see any questions for today's call, and that means that I've either explained this amazingly or you simply don't want to ask any questions, which that's cool too. With that being said, I am going to end today's call, and I will see all of you in next week's episode, Wednesday, 9 a.m. Central Standard Time. Be sure to tell your coworkers, your friends, your customers. The more the merrier. I love the opportunity to be here teaching you. And once again, if you want to really master IT, go and check out my programs at buildingautomationmonthly.com/store. Thank you so much. Take care, and I will see you all in the next episode.